thank you for coming. There's a lot of new faces, and so if you do have the questions, make sure and ask me. Tonight, we're going to cover and understand what it means to balance the immune system. So, especially with COVID, people thought what we have to do is boost the immune system. That's what I think everybody sold millions of dollars of supplements boosting the immune system. Everything from mushroom coffees to zincs and things like that. And so I think it's important to know that we don't want to boost the immune system. We actually want to regulate it or balance it. So that's probably the main concept we're going to go over tonight. I'm going to go over each component of the immune system, how they work and why they're important. I'm going to tell you about a project I'm working on right now. I just finished writing a book on myela, and I'll tell you what that means and how it pertains to our health. What does the immune system do? Most people know that the immune system is there to take care of infections, but actually it does quite a bit more than that. It not only takes care of infections, it also helps us clear out toxins. It also helps us communicate one cell to another. So there's chemicals that the immune system puts out that drift through our bodies and actually do a lot of the signaling. So it's very, very important. One of the other things the immune system does is it comes in and it repairs the cells, but it also gets rid of old cells. If we didn't get rid of the old cells, we'd be a pile of mush by the time we were 1 year old. So it's very important to have that concept to it. I added just different pictures in here because one of the biggest complaints I had on my last show or my last seminar was that, man, these slides are boring without pictures. So there's just goofy pictures in here as we go along. The immune system is made up of organs. So I'll go through each one of those and what they do, different cells, and then different signaling molecules. And really that makes up the whole immune system. When we talk about the immune system, there's two parts to it. There's the innate immune system and there's the adaptive. And I'll go into each one of those. The innate just means, hey, basically, if we had a house and we go in and we put seals around our doors so the cockroaches and ants and the mud, bugs and everything don't come in, that's kind of our innate system. But if they come in, you set out specific poisons and traps for them, that's our adaptive immune system. So we'll go into that specifically. The major organ systems and tissues. One of the biggest ones that we talk about when we're talking about the immune system is bone marrow. Bone marrow is when you break open a bone, it's the soft red stuff in the middle of it. And bone marrow is where all of your blood cells are made. So if we run a CBC test like they run at the hospital and they tell you how many white blood cells you have, how many red blood cells, and what different kind you have, all of those are made in your bone marrow. Bone marrow is found in your long bones, so really in your femur and your humerus, but also in your pelvis. And that's the main places that you may have enough bone marrow to make a difference for you. And one of the problems that you can have with bone marrow is that it can become suppressed. One of the things that really suppresses bone marrow is heavy metals. So anybody here working in the steel industry or working out in the oil fields, anything like that, it can hammer you as a bone marrow situation. So we look forward in history and all of a sudden now you're 60, 70 years old and your white blood cell count starts to drop or you're not producing red blood cells. A lot of times we've had bone marrow suppression due to things like that. Leukemia, which is a cancer of the bone marrow. And then we can have reduced immune cell production. So specifically, there are some genetics that can lead to bone marrow issues. And so when we do genetic reviews, there's a few people here that we say, hey, as we get older, we're going to monitor this. And it may be a situation where we refer you to an oncologist or somebody to actually increase your immune cell production so you don't get sick as you get older. The thymus. Many people don't even know about the thymus. The thymus is kind of a sponge-shaped organ in your chest, right up behind your sternum. It's there when you're born, and that's when it's actually its biggest. It's probably by the time you're 1 or so. And by the time you get out to your teenage years, it's pretty well disappeared. It's gone. Very few people, I think one time in my life have I ever seen anybody that was older that still had a thymus gland. It basically is a maturation place for cells. So these T cells, which I'll get into later, are immune cells that go there and basically they get educated. They get taught to know what their job is. And so that's kind of what the importance is of the thymus. There are some cases that individuals are not born with a thymus. So now they're the ones that get out to be a little older and they start having immune problems. And it's because their T cells were never educated by the thymus. So I like to call the thymus like a preschool for your immune cells is what it's like. the word that they use for it is invulate, which means shrinks. It shrinks over time. And if you don't have it, your cells are uneducated. They're uneducated cells. I had a professor who used to call them idiot cells, but that's different. The spleen. Most people have heard about the spleen, but they don't know what it does. The spleen is down here kind of underneath the rib cage and on this side. It is a big lymph tissue. It kind of looks like a sponge, but it has a lot to do with cleaning out old cells. Some people will have their spleen removed if they have things like sickle cell. So individuals with traits from Middle East or African descent, a lot of times if they get a deficit of oxygen, their red blood cells become different shapes. They get stuck in their spleen and they'll have to have it removed. Individuals will get in a car accident and have a problem. Other individuals will get certain viruses that affect the spleen. But its main job is to filter out old cells and to filter out debris. It acts like a big lymph node, is what it acts like. Tonsils and lymph nodes. So a lot of people have their tonsils removed, but actually they serve a big purpose. Their purpose is to filter out any of the bad bacteria, any of the toxins and things that we're exposed to in our throats. And so they're very specific in what they do with T cells. Again, T cells are educated there. They figure out, hey, what's your normal flora in your mouth or what's the bad guy? And that's where they figure that out at, is inside the tonsils. So it's one of those things. I've had kids come in and their tonsils are not huge. And I'll say, let's leave it for 6 months more. You're in that 13, 14-year-old range. Let's just get just a little bit out of it. And that way they're educated just that much more. And so very important in there. Lymph nodes. Lymph nodes are areas where we actually store T cells. We store other cells until they're needed. So if you ever look at blood work and it's normal, so you have normal white blood cells, everything's fine, and all of a sudden you catch a cold and they do it maybe 2 weeks later, and all of a sudden you have really high white blood cells in there. Well, you didn't just make them. They were stored away. They were stored in your spleen. They were stored in your lymph nodes. They were stored in your tonsils to be ready for the day that they were needed. And so lymph nodes not only filter out stuff, they're also storage mechanisms for those cells. On anybody that was here for the lymphatic talk, this is kind of a review of that. And if you want to know more about the lymphatic system, that's up on if you go to our website, go to video library, the seminars are all up there. And we go into it there. But MALT, mucosa-associated lymphoid tissues. These are tissues that you find anywhere where you're going to become exposed to the outside world. So these are tissues in the throat. These are tissues in the gut, in your lungs, your urogenital tract, vaginal tissues. These are where basically we have created a spongy area that produces mucus that also holds your immune system in it. So our biggest one is going to be GALT, the one in the digestive tract, and I'll go into that. But each one of our systems that is exposed to the outside world has a lot of MALT tissue in it. B cells. So now, when we look at immune cells, and these are the things that you hear about most often now whenever you're looking at research, they're coming in, they're figuring out more and more what they're doing every day. But B cells are a type of white blood cell, a lymphocyte in particular, and lymphocytes are basically born in the bone marrow, and they go to the lymphatic system, and they're raised there. They're actually matured, and they're raised there. So that's why they're called lymphocytes. The B cell in particular, its main job is to produce what's called antibodies. And I'll get into antibodies a little later, but antibodies are kind of like flags. They're flags, and B cell is educated, and once it's educated, it makes flags and goes in and targets the bad guys. It also has the ability to paint bad guys. They kind of paint them with like a waxy substance so that they can't move anymore, and so everybody in the house knows that they're a bad guy. So it's kind of like I don't know if you've ever seen, there's some shows where they're like detective shows where they'll show the person gets touched by different people, and all of a sudden they turn on the black light and they can see which people touched them. That's kind of what the B cell does. It touches them and leaves a footprint there, or a fingerprint there, showing that they touched it in the past. T cells. T cells have a number of variations, and we'll go into each one of them. T cells are kind of your snipers, your killer cells. They come in and they see a bad guy and they kill it, and that's their job. They also recognize friend and foe very well. So they recognize not only viruses and bacteria, but they also recognize cancers too. So they play a critical role in getting rid of the bad guys. On the T cells in particular, there's one called natural killer cell. And the natural killer cell is one specifically that comes in and is able to recognize cancer and kill it out. But in general, as it's floating around, if it sees anything that doesn't look right, it just kills it. That's what it does. It has to have differentiation. And so a lot of times, if we see too many toxins building up in our bodies, these natural killer cells will get confused one way or the other. Either they will go over extreme and they'll begin to kill everything, even your good healthy cells, or they'll come in and they will kill just cancer cells and they will let all the bad guys go, like all your other bacteria, fungus, and things like that. So they have to be regulated. And so there are some chemicals that help it regulate. Macrophages. So in the cardiology lecture I did, in the lymphatic lecture I did, macrophages played a big role in both of those. Macrophages are kind of like if you watched Ghostbusters, the green globby ghost that goes around and just eats everything, that's pretty much a macrophage. A macrophage's job is to come around and eat anything that it thinks is bad. Sometimes it eats good things too. That's what happens in cardiology issues. But once it eats it, it takes and puffs up and pushes everything out to the outside of it so that other B cells and other T cells can come by. And once it pushes it out to the outside, they come by, they recognize, oh, you're a macrophage. What'd you eat today? Oh, yep, that must be a bad guy. And now they've started to educate. So that macrophage is really important about educating things. When we talk about cancers, which we've done in other lectures, the macrophage can be tricked by cancers. So basically, cancer will come up, have the macrophage eat it, the macrophage eats it, the macrophage takes it, turns around, and puts those cells on the outside of itself and mask it so that other T cells and B cells can't recognize the cancer anymore. So that's how sometimes the cancer gets past this thing, is by using macrophages as a fake signal to say it's a good guy. So kind of interesting there. The dendritic cells. The dendritic cells are a lot like the macrophage, but they're a lot more dainty. So a macrophage is that big old glob and everything. This dendritic cell, they call it dendritic because it has these arms on it, and that's what it means is arms. It looks like a little bitty octopus. So it'll come in, it'll wrap up a bad guy, it'll spend quite a bit of time analyzing. Is this a good guy? Is this a bad guy? But once it figures out it's a bad guy, it rips it apart and then holds out all the pieces for everything to see. And it says, this is definitely a bad guy. Here's what his hat looks like. Here's what his shoes look like. Here's what his shirt looks like. Go get him. So dendrites are a little different than the macrophage. Dendritic cells are a little bit harder to fool than a macrophage too. Macrophages are much easier to fool than the dendritic cells. So on chemicals, immune chemicals, and signalers. So I think at the point where we just got to, I think the general public has a decent idea. Hey, there's white blood cells. They test them at the hospital. I have this immunity that goes out and kills things. This is the point when you start talking to medical personnel, you talk to doctors. Most of them don't know where this comes from, what the cytokines are, what interleukins are, and how they work. So you're getting a step up on them when you see this, and it may go over your head. And if it does, we'll circle back on it. But cytokines are very, very, very small proteins. So when you look at white blood cells under a microscope, they're so small that even under a microscope, you have to blow it up a great big dish to see a white blood cell. These you can't see on a microscope. You have to have a special electron microscope to even be able to see these at all. And at that point, they're still very small. But they play an extremely big role. These are signaling molecules that tell the immune system to speed up or slow down. A lot of times, once you've had the first interaction and you have a B cell or T cell have an interaction with something, as soon as it figures out this is a bad guy, it starts putting out cytokines. And that cytokine basically comes in and it says, we need to bring in the troops. So I like to think of them kind of as a cell phone. Once you trigger, all the cell phones are going off. It's a phone free. Everybody's calling everyone. That's these cytokines. They also go through the bloodstream extremely easy because they're so small. Not only can they get around the cells and get going to places, they can also go through the walls of the arteries and of the veins, and they are one of the few that can pass in and out from veins back to the lymphatic system very easy. So their communication is extremely fast. If you've ever hit your toe and it swells up really quick, a lot of times it's cytokines that are causing part of that reaction there, or at least sending out the reaction to say, come here and let's work on this. The overproduction causes what's called a cytokine storm. So there are some individuals out there that their immune systems are so hyped up and so overdriven that you get a cytokine storm. When I first started talking, I mentioned that a lot of individuals during COVID were trying to boost their immune system and boost it and boost it and boost it. Well, at some point, if you boost it too much, when you do get infected, it isn't that nice response, hey, let's heal this up. It's an overblown response. A lot of individuals that actually had during COVID had respiratory issues that were extreme. It's because they had a cytokine storm. It wasn't a little response that says, hey, come in and kill all these viruses, we'll be fine. Instead, it came in and dumped so many cytokines in that they actually had problems with swelling and inflammation. It wasn't the virus killing them, their own immune system was killing them. And so many people that had breathing problems, it was that cytokine storm. Interleukins. These are a type of cytokine. And these ones don't actually cause any kind of reaction. So the cytokines themselves in general are mostly communicators, but they can cause a little inflammation. The interleukins are purely communicators. They actually cause no reaction themselves. There are more studies now, and there are some really good tests coming out measuring interleukins. We weren't measuring them until probably about 15 years ago. We knew they were there, but we didn't have any tests to measure them. One of the interesting things about interleukins, it can tell you kind of what's going on behind the scenes, what kind of communication is going on. So when we look at spy versus spy, and we're tapping into phone lines and stuff, that's kind of what you're doing now when you can read interleukins. So one of the ones that I find most fascinating is probably 6 years ago, I gave a lecture on autism. And in my research, one of the things that is extremely elevated in autism is interleukin 6. And interleukin 6 plays a big role in communication between the immune system and neurological system. And so when interleukin 6 goes up, it basically says we have a lot of inflammation going on in the brain and we got to figure out why. And so now we can look at autism and say at least we know there's some kind of inflammatory process. And it's not publicized much, but interleukins tells us that it's there. These are mainly released by T cells, macrophages. And then the interesting thing here is the endothelial cells. Endothelial cells are the cells on the inside of a lining of anything. So on the inside of your gut, on the inside of your arteries, and things like that. They basically, when the endothelial cells release that interleukin, they say we have a problem. So we are seeing more endothelial interleukins now than ever. So individuals are having more food sensitivities and they're overreacting to it. Individuals are having more cardiovascular situations now at a younger age than ever before. They're starting to report all the way down to 8 years old and things. It's because our interleukins are being released by these cells inside these tissues, and they're causing inflammatory issues that we never had in the past. So they regulate cell growth. They differentiate. So cells, especially in white blood cells, when they're born in the bone marrow, they come out and they're not mature yet. So you may have a T cell that is a killer cell. You may have another one that is a cytotoxic cell. This interleukins tells it what it needs to do. So for instance, if you don't have any infections going on, if you don't have anything going on, it wants to make more natural killer cells to be ready when things come in. That's your first line of defense. But if it already knows that you have an infection, interleukins are high, it's going to come in and make other cytotoxic cells to attack them and other cells to help out. So that makes a difference. Plays a role in autoimmune diseases, cancers, and then I really probably should put autism up there, but this is a major player in chronic inflammation. And the book I just finished writing actually talks quite a bit about that. Prostaglandins. Many people have heard of prostaglandins because a lot of times When we talk about prostaglandins, they'll talk about painkillers. People take painkillers that either shut off receptor sites for prostaglandins or reduce them down. They are a type of fat that acts like a hormone, and it actually causes your sensation of pain a lot of times. It'll actually cause the blood vessel to open up. It'll cause it to get redder and hotter in an area, and you feel more pain when it comes to prostaglandins. They are found in every tissue. Individuals that are heavier, individuals that are fatter, a lot of times will have more prostaglandins than other people because it's lipid based already. They have extra lipids, and therefore they have more prostaglandins. So when we look at myofibralgia issues, we look at chronic pain syndromes, you rarely find those in very thin people because they have less of this. Usually the heavier the person, the more prostaglandins you're going to have, the more pain syndromes you have. So staying thin from that aspect makes a difference. They modulate inflammation, pain, fever, and vascular tone. And so when it says modulate means takes up and down. For the most part, they propagate it. They make it increase is what they do. And again, obesity leads to overproduction, which leads to chronic pain and inflammation. One other thing to mention here too, overuse of anti-inflammatories can actually make you upregulate prostaglandins. So individuals that are constantly taking Tylenol, Advil, ibuprofen, things like that when they don't need it. There are certain people that just have it in their daily regimen, and I'll say, why are you taking it? Well, I've just taken it all my life. They're going to upregulate their prostaglandins and have more pain in general if you're using it when you don't need to be. Histamines. So histamines, actually, these are chemicals that we pretty much know about when we get allergies and when you have allergic reaction to things. But the interesting thing about histamines, their actually core job is to trap and kill parasites. That's what their job is. And unfortunately, our body thinks that most pollens are parasites. There's some interesting, if you go on YouTube, there's some interesting videos of pollen landing on skin tissues and things like that. Usually they look like little balls, sometimes spiky, but usually a little ball. But when a piece of pollen touches a soft tissue, it actually sends out what looks like a little worm, and it creeps inside the soft tissue. So as you get it in your nose, you get it on your throat, things like that, it actually sends out that little worm. It's kind of like sperm it's actually trying to put into you. It thinks you're another plant, and it's trying to breed you. Unfortunately, histamine thinks, our eosinophils and histamines think that it is a parasite trying to dig into you like a little worm. And so that's why you react to pollen with the same thing that's reacting to parasites. That's why histamines do it. Histamines are typically made by what's called mast cells inside you. Mast cells are not necessarily an immune cell, but they do work in the immune system. They're made by basophils and eosinophils. And their job is to regulate so that you don't have a parasite problem and you keep clean. The problem is most of us don't have parasites nowadays. So they are looking for a job. They remind me of a dog, that if you have a dog and you don't give that dog a job, that dog's job is to sit by you, follow you around, or go fetch something. It will go chew on something, it'll tear up something. That's kind of what these basophils and eosinophils do when they create histamine. If they don't have a job, they're going to attack you. So a lot of individuals that have allergies and stuff are probably leading a little too clean of a life. Individuals that live in the cities tend to have more allergies, more histamine problems than kids that grew up in the country, because you're out actually getting bugs, you're fighting them off, you're doing things that you should. And there's been numerous studies on that. The other thing about these mast cells, these basophils, when you are dehydrated, you will produce more histamine than if you're hydrated. And it's kind of interesting. These mast cells, when you're hydrated, it says, okay, we have more of a water barrier. We have more saliva. We have more dampness, so we can keep more parasites and things away. As soon as those get dry and they start to crack, they say, okay, we need to make more histamine. When you are hydrated, those same cells make serotonin, your happy neurotransmitter. So you're much happier. You feel much better when you're hydrated. So that's my little spill about histamines and hydration. If you hydrate when you have allergies, you'll actually have less histamine, you'll have less allergies. Funny thing is, almost every allergy medicine out there lowers your water, it actually dehydrates you. So even though you're taking your antihistamines, you need to drink more water at that point. Complement. Complement, this is another type of protein, and these are even smaller. These are extremely, extremely small. And complement tends to be like dominoes. As soon as you click one complement, they start falling down in a certain sequence, and they make different processes based on that. They circulate very easily through the bloodstream. Just on their own, they're always there, but they can't be triggered until one of the other cytokines and interleukins turns on and says it's time to do something. So they're always there. Some people have complement deficiencies, which means they get sick very easy or they overreact to things. They tend to cause a complement cascade, and so each one of these has a different activation. This opsonization that is right here, that basically means painting. They essentially come in, if they see a bad guy and they think it's a bad guy, they just paint it so everybody knows it and it can't go anywhere, it can't function anymore. They work very well with viruses. So a lot of times we will see people that have COVID, other viruses, we will see C3 complement go way up. So we'll take an individual who is in the hospital, we're checking them out, we're running blood work on them, and all their white blood cells come back perfect. We can't figure out what's the matter with them. They look perfect, but they act like they have a virus. We come in and run a complement test on them, and all of a sudden C3 comes back off the charts. We'll say, this is a virus that the body can't recognize. That sometimes happens with herpes viruses. That's why we get shingles hiding in our body. We also get the herpes simplex on our lip. Our body can't recognize it very good, so our cells don't come and kill it, but complement attacks it. So it's kind of another way to come in and do it. There are the C5 through C9. These ones basically are kind of like drills. When they find a bad cell, they come in and drill holes in it so everything leaks out of it, is what they do. And it's actually a very neat little complex. Once in a while, people that get way too much complement or they start boosting their immune system too high, they will produce way too much C5 through C9, and they start breaking their own cells down. This is a little bit of what happens with ivermectin and fenbendazole. They're made to increase this. So taking it, if you need to kill out parasites, or you take it to knock back a virus for a short time period, is okay. As soon as you start putting it in every day for an extended period of time, you're popping holes in all your cells. And you can see this with individuals that have been taking it for 6 months or longer. They will start having problems where they're aging rather quickly. They're starting to have neurological issues, and so it makes a big difference there. I think the C5A is one too. When we measure it, it's another attractant. Once it sticks to something and starts popping a hole into it, it actually brings in all the rest of C6 all the way through C9 to pop holes in it. So it's kind of a signaler too. That's an important one. Okay, I did a talk on cholesterol that's out there on videos too. We hear a lot about how bad cholesterol is and that cholesterol is going to kill us. And I have a great book in there that's 101 studies of why low cholesterol will kill you. High cholesterol will kill you too, but we have to have it. Basically, every cell in our body, the outside of it, when we talk about the phospholipid layer, the fat layer around the cell, that's cholesterol. Every cell in your body is made of cholesterol. So if you take down cholesterol too low, you can't replenish your cells, you can't rehab yourself. Immune cells in particular have very tight phospholipid layers because they're soldiers. It's kind of like our soldiers. You wouldn't send them out naked to go fight in the war. We want them to have uniforms. We want them to have flak jackets, all that. We do the same thing with our immune cells. They require a lot of cholesterol to make immune cells properly. So it's important. Also, immune cells use cholesterol to make signaling mechanisms. So when we look at interleukins, in particular, any fat-based signaling mechanism, it is done with cholesterol. Cholesterol is the base for that. So if you start taking cholesterol too low, your body's ability to warn other cells that there's something going on diminishes greatly. So it's important for that too. They also, lipoproteins, so when we say lipoproteins, we're talking about HDL, LDL, those kind of things that we hear, good cholesterol, bad cholesterol. Both of them serve a function in neutralizing bacterial toxins. So If you come in and catch an E. coli bacteria, you go down to Mexico, you get E. coli down there, you come back up here, and you're sick, these lipoproteins, LDL in particular, goes out and binds to the toxins when you actually kill that. So you can come up here and you can get an antibiotic, you kill the E. coli, and about a day later, maybe a week later, maybe you start getting a little rash or you just don't feel good, you're really sick. That's because you don't have what it takes to bind those toxins. That cholesterol, the LDL, and that helps bind that. So that's pretty important when we're looking at individuals that have had cholesterol lowered below that 160 range. They don't maintain that anymore. So it helps keep from having sepsis, which is an overall systemic infection. Negative roles. LDL, we talked about this in the cardiac lecture, but LDL, when it comes in and it starts actually plaquing inside of a cell, it's actually trying to fix a problem. There's something going on inside that endothelial layer, the inside of the arteries. It's coming there to actually clean out the toxins and that kind of thing. If we look back in history, we find mummies and things. They had very, 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 very little atherosclerosis. And now we're getting kids at 8 years old with it. It's because we have a toxin burden that the LDL is trying to clean up. If you go and help it clean it out, it'll actually clean it up and it doesn't get worse from there. If you don't have the proper signaling, you're not cleaning out the toxins, that's whenever you start to get these problems with atherosclerosis and hardening of the arteries. But excess cholesterol, and there's people that come in to see me, and I will look at their cholesterol numbers, and it's like, well, I don't want to be on a statin drug. I'm like, you don't have a choice at this point. You've done things we need to get down, and maybe we'll be able to come off of them. But there are people that need statin drugs because an excess of it causes inflammation too. These macrophages, when they come in and try to help LDL clean it up, they become foam cells, which then cause the artery to close off, and you can actually have a heart attack or a stroke from that. So that's important. Very low cholesterol can impair the immune signaling like we talked about. So if you don't have enough, you're going to have a problem, but too much, you have a problem. The balance is what's important. Okay, we're going to talk about the two sections of the immune system. So I said before, the immune system, kind of like imagine it being like your house. We have the innate immune system. The innate immune system is kind of our general barriers that we have. So we come in, we caulk around the windows, we put the trim on the door. We're just trying to keep the critters from coming in, and we're trying to get rid of them. So it's not very specific. It just serves the job of any bad guy shows up, we're going to take care of it. You are born with innate immunity. So a lot of times when we hear innate, it basically means what you're born with, what you're starting with. And so this, you could just say your born immunity right here. It provides a rapid, non-specific. So when I talk about the trim being around the doors and windows, it's keeping out all the critters. It's not locally to one thing. It recognizes common microbes and things. So it will go out, and it'd be like us going out in the street right now. If we walked outside and we're looking downtown, or maybe we're at the parade for 4th of July, if there was somebody came out carrying a big machine gun walking down the street, even with all the other guns, all the other people there, you'd probably notice them carrying a big machine gun. That's kind of what they're saying here. It can recognize big bad guys. It just doesn't recognize the ones that are subtle. So we have it all through our life. And one of its other jobs, after it sees that there's a bad guy and it kills a bad guy, it wants to tell the active immunity, or adaptive immunity. Adaptive immunity is the one that you create over time. You learn who the good guy is, you learn who the bad guy is, and so it teaches it too. Winter, I think I have another slide that's going to break it down too. But barriers. So when we look at skin is part of our innate immunity. Our skin has acid on it. It has pores on it that push out oils and things like that. It works to keep us safe. That's part of our innate immunity. Our mucus, so our snot in our head. A lot of people, when they start catching a cold, the first thing they want to do is go take something to actually stop your nose from running. Your nose is running because it's innate immunity. It's trying to run out of you and get everything out of your head. So sometimes we do the opposite of what we should do. It causes some inflammation. When it realizes there's a bad guy there, it actually causes more blood flow to take care of it. So you'll see, if you look in somebody's throat when they're very first getting a cold, a lot of times the first sign is actually the throat is bright red. And that's because it's trying to put more blood flow there. It's trying to make more fluid there to take care of it. The phagocytosis. So one of the things that we can put into the innate immunity is the macrophage, our big green blob that walks around and eats things. It's kind of indiscriminate. Sometimes it'll eat something and then decide whether it's good or bad. So it's kind of one of the habits of it. So it's really part of our innate and our adaptive immune systems. Now I'll break it down. The skin is one, the mucosal membranes. These secretions all block the entry. So one of the interesting ones here, in women in particular, you get older, you stop having enough estrogen, and so the vaginal wall dries up. When we're younger, it protects us. There's always some fluid there to protect us. You'll start seeing maybe a little spot of blood in the urine analysis and stuff. That's one of these ways that our innate immunity protects us when we're younger. And so sometimes getting some estrogen or even keeping that mucosal membrane moist makes a difference. Chemical barriers. So in our mouth, we have liposomes, which break down starches, but they also break down bad bacteria in our mouth. It's very important. It's also important to have good bacteria in your mouth to keep your mouth educated. So if you go in and you're taking Listerine all the time, basically your immune system in there, anytime any good bacteria or bad bacteria, it sees it all as an enemy because you've cleaned out the good. So having a good, healthy bacteria in your mouth helps make this a better innate immune system. It makes a slime layer on there that your body recognizes and makes it better. The stomach acid. When we take and we put omeprazole into the gut, when we start putting those kind of things in to cut down our stomach acid, we are opening up the pathway for microbes to come in. So a lot of times, individuals that are put on omeprazole or acid reducers, you go out and you can almost predict 3 years out, they're going to get H. pylori because they don't have enough stomach acid to kill it out, and they're going to get it. We need to take care of that in a different way. And I did a talk on digestive health, which that was covered in. Again, the macrophages are there. Neutrophils. A lot of times on blood work, we will see neutrophils as one of the things listed. Neutrophils, lymphocytes, monocytes. Neutrophils are not the same big slimy guy as the macrophages. They're much smaller, probably about half to a quarter the size. They will kind of halfway engulf, and then they're full of chemicals, granulocytes inside of them, that they basically start to eat it up. They are pretty discriminatory. They like bacteria. They don't do much for viruses. They don't do much for funguses. But if somebody has a bacterial infection, you'll see the neutrophils go up. So when we're looking at that CBC blood work and we see neutrophils, you almost always have to go, oh, they got a bacterial infection. That's kind of universal there. In natural killer cells, I mentioned these. These are a type of lymphocyte that basically go out and they are snipers. They like to just kill things. They really like to kill cancer cells. Now, if you have an overinfection of something else like a virus or something, they will come in and help, but their main things is cancer and cells that just don't look right. So sometimes you will have an injury. You had your foot ran over by a car or something like that, and there's a lot of debris there. So those cells have been squished open and you don't know what to do with it. A lot of times the natural killer cells will come in and start trying to help clean that up as well. So they know what a normal cell is and what a non-normal cell is, and they try to help clean that up, and they put out signals. The complement system. Again, the complement system is part of the innate and part of the adaptive. These are plasma proteins which enhance it. So any one of these signals above, if the barrier gets broken, if the chemical barrier gets broken, if the macrophages get set off, natural killers get set off, they all stimulate the complement system, which is like the dominoes. It just starts that domino effect, which sends out more chemicals. So they have this domino effect is the inflammatory response. They mobilize these cells to get them moving, so they pull them out of the spleen, they pull them out of lymph nodes, and they increase blood flow so they can get places. They not only increase the blood flow, they also vasodilate or open up the blood vessels so they can get through. Many individuals will have higher blood pressure if they have some kind of virus or they have some kind of bacterial infection. So you can have a person, they go to the doctor and they only go when they're sick. But every time they go to the doctor, they take their blood pressure and like, well, you need to be on blood pressure medication. Well, maybe you need to see you sometime when I'm not sick, and that makes a difference. So we have individuals that'll have normal blood pressure, but they only go to the doctor once in a blue moon, and that's when they're sick, and now they're on blood pressure medication and they didn't need to be. So always make sure that you're checking your blood pressure too when you're healthy and when you're feeling good. They increase permeability. So when this cascade gets set off, it opens up the pores on your arteries, your veins, and your lymph tissues. And that's just so these white blood cells can go in and out of them. I had the ability to see some live tissue one time under a microscope of a person that was sick. And I actually got to watch white blood cells squeeze in through the piece of artery. And so you couldn't think that it would even happen because the white blood cell looks huge compared to this wall, and all of a sudden it almost acts like a ghost. It just comes up to it and goes and comes out the other side of it. So that was kind of a neat situation that I had the opportunity to see once. So redness and swelling. This is part of that cascade too. So the redness and swelling is just the increase of vasodilation and the inflammatory process. But the heat is interesting. Many of your bacteria, many of your proteins have a very limited window when they're viable. So a lot of times if you get up to 99.3, 99.4, a lot of viruses, a lot of bacteria will start to die at that point. When you get up to 101, 102, most of your viruses will start to be killed out. So a lot of times we'll go in and we start saying, oh, I'm around 101. We start throwing in medication to cool it down. It may not feel good to us because we hurt and we don't feel good when it's there, but it's doing its job. It's actually killing them out. If you get up to 103.5, 104, especially as an adult, then you're starting to break down your own tissues, especially neurological tissues. So that's when you start getting concerned as an adult. At 103.5, 104, 105, we have some problems and we need to cool it down. Kids can go a little higher than we can. They can go up to that 104, 105 in that ballpark before we really get concerned about them. They have a little more latitude on that. So pain. In the world of chiropractic, the world of neurology, there's a term that says pain begets pain. So if you have pain in more than one place, so if I have pain in my hand and I have pain in my shoulder, and let's say this pain is a 1, this pain is a 1, well, you would think, okay, it adds up to a 2 in your brain. It doesn't work that way. It's 1 plus 1 equals 4. And now if I have more pain, I have a 1 and a 1 and a 1 and a 1, now my pain's at 20. So pain begets pain. Sometimes pain is important. It tells you to slow down, to stop. Your body, if you're out working, probably most people have had this at some time or another. You're out doing strenuous work, you're working in the garden, you're working everything, and you don't quite feel good. And you say, well, I'm just going to finish up this job. And you're able to get all the way through the job, through the day, through the work week. And then as soon as you rest, all of a sudden you're like, man, I am sick. The truth is, you were sick all the time. You just didn't give your body a chance to fight it. That's what the pain's job is for. It says, hey, stop. We need to take some time to heal it. So pain is there for a reason. At a certain point, I'll cover that. I'll make sure I cover that before I get out. Pain is there for a reason up to a certain point. On innate immunity and adaptive immunity, there is a point when you get to that you've killed off all the bad guys, you've tried to clean up all the bad cells and everything, and it starts sending out a signal to stop. There are certain complements that say stop. There's certain interleukins that say stop, we've had enough. That is the difference between acute inflammation and chronic inflammation. Acute inflammation means it's less than 6 to 8 weeks. Your body's actually healing and doing what it's supposed to do. You've crushed your hand, it swells up, it's carrying away all the old tissue, it's bringing in new tissue, it's doing its job, increasing blood flow. You get out past that 8 weeks, and now it's become chronic. Every injury you have, for the most part, should be healed about 90% at 8 weeks. That's kind of the gold standard. You go get a surgery at about 8 weeks, 90% of that healing should be done by then. And you should start resolving that inflammation. It should start going down at that point. It should start going down. If you're out 8 weeks past a surgery, if you're out 8 weeks past a fall, if you're out 8 weeks past an infection, and you're still ramping up, there needs to be something different done. We actually need to get the immune system to modulate and regulate at that point, because it becomes a problem. And that's where probably we do some things wrong. We try to regulate the immune system early on. Tylenol, ibuprofen, morphine, all those kind of things. when the truth is you want those signals to go out early on. Clean this up, take care of this, this is a big problem. If your body can't mount enough of a response in the acute phase, it doesn't get the signal to shut it down. So you want to have that response, but then you want it to come down. It's important. And we too often in the medical world will damper that, and then we end up with chronic problems. I mentioned fever already. Adaptive immunity. So now, this is probably the hardest part of what I'll talk about, and I'll make it as easy as I can. So adaptive immunity. This says that our body now is able to recognize specific bad guys. And there's some things we specifically do to recognize them. We have our ability for our cells to have memory, to remember bad guys and good guys. So this is a little different than the innate. Innate, we're just putting up walls in that. Now when the guy comes in, we're going to say, well, you know what? That looks like a termite in the wall. We need to fix termite. Oh, that looks like mouse droppings. We need to set out a mouse trap. We're specifically going for the bad guys. When we do this, some of the key things that go on in adaptive immunity is antigen presentation. And I think I have this slide probably backwards. I'm going to go fairly deep into antigens and antibodies, but antigens are the chemicals and the proteins on the outside of a cell that say who you are. One of the best ways to explain this is we had COVID, and you probably heard everything about a spike protein. A spike protein was on the outside of the virus, and we depicted it as an S in the lab. It was always an S on there, a spike protein, and it was all over the outside of the virus. That is the antigen. The antigen is what you look like. It's your uniform for the cell. And we have good antigens, and we have bad antigens. We have the good ones are what's on our cells, and the bad ones are what's on the bad guys. Remember early on, I said we had dendritic cells and macrophages. Their job, when they got a hold of a bad guy, rip him apart, and then take the antigen, the thing that made it so you knew who he was, and hold it out and give it to the B cells and the T cells to educate everybody. So it's like standing up in the town, here's the S. We got COVID here. We got COVID here. That's what it does. That's what an antigen-presenting cell does. The T lymphocytes. There are a number of T lymphocytes. There's T helper cells. The T helper cells kind of go around and instruct all the other T cells what to do. If you remember, we talked about interleukins. We talked about cytokines. T helper cells put out a lot of interleukins and a lot of cytokines because they walk around and like, okay guys, hey, did you hear? There's a bad guy over here. And they throw out the messages. They're throwing them out everywhere, making the phone calls. That's their job, to tell people, hey, we got bad guys on board. I'm sending out all these messengers to tell you about it. The cytotoxic T cells, these are killer cells. These are not the natural killer cells. The natural killer cells were kind of a little less discriminate. They walked around, and if they thought you were bad, they just killed you. These cytotoxic cells are very, very specific. When they see something and they've been told it's bad, they'll come in and kill it. Otherwise, they're just standing there waiting. Kind of like the guards outside the palace in London. They're very calm. You can do everything you want to, just don't touch your horse, and you'll be okay. I talked about cytokines and that. The CD4, CD8, these are cytokine markers that basically show you what kind of cell it is. So when we do a gas chromatograph, we do that kind of stuff, we can see what kind of cells they are. That's how we mark them. That's why it's there. These T regulator cells. I talked about shutting the process down. The T helper cells go along, kind of rev everybody up. Hey, come on, go. I say that the T regulator cells are kind of like the person standing at the pep rally that's over by the corner, the principal and that, who's coming over, come down. Hey, don't stop that over there. That's kind of them. They're stopping the process before it gets too rowdy, is what they do. If your T regulator cells are not working, you end up with autoimmune disease, is what you end up with. The B lymphocytes. So remember, everything's a lymphocyte that was made in the bone marrow and goes out and is matured in the lymphatic system. So the lymphatic system is incredibly important for these cells. The B lymphocytes, Their main job are to make memories out of the antigens. So whenever the macrophage, the dendritic cells capture the bad guy, they love to go up to the B cell and say, here's what I found. Here's the bad guy. And the B cell takes and looks at it for a while, and he does one or two things. He says, yep, I've seen this before. I already have enough of this information. Or it says, I've never seen this before. It actually pulls it in, examines it for a while, and it figures out exactly what it looks like, and it makes a puzzle piece that fits on it. It's called an antibody. So now we have the S antigen. Now we have the antibody that fits on it, that shows it. So when we went and did COVID tests to see whether you had COVID, we were actually looking to see at the antigen. We were looking to see if you had the S inside you. But whenever we gave you vaccines or you had COVID, we came in to see if you had immunity. We tested to see if you had the antibody, because the antibody is what tells your body that you've seen it and you know what it is. So these B cells make these antibodies. And I like to kind of say they look like a flag with a piece of chewing gum on it that fits perfectly on whatever the antigen is, whether it's that S or what it is. And so now the B cells plump up full of them. They plump up full of these antibodies. There are actually, I have here 2 kind of B cells. There's actually 3. So there's actually a long-term memory cell. The plasma cell recognizes it, and it makes enough antibodies that kind of look like spray paint or tar. And it comes along, as soon as it sees some of these bad guys, it releases its antibodies and it coats the outside of the cell and makes it so it can't do anything. It paints it again. The B memory cell, it makes these antibodies, the flags, and its job is when it sees the bad guy again, it bursts open and it puts these flags out everywhere. These flags are inactive until they actually hit the antigen. As soon as they plug into the antigen like a puzzle piece, the flag springs up and says, I'm here, come kill me, come kill me. And that's the way it works out. And so these B memory cells, they will multiply. They'll keep multiplying out, and they can last for about 10 years in our body. That's kind of the average. If you don't get reinfected, it lasts for about 10 years. That's why if you go get your vaccines, if you go get the diphtheria tetanus vaccine, they'll say, well, make sure you get it every 10 years. If you haven't been re-exposed to it in 10 years, you will begin to, those numbers will drop and you won't have immunity anymore to it. If you get exposed, let's say you go step on a rusty nail, well, then it's probably good for another 10 years, truthfully. But if you haven't gotten it, and now you're out to 11, 12 years, you step on that rusty nail, you have no B memory cells to fight it off. These B cells, memory cells, every time you get exposed, they replenish. So that's why we can take and do an antibody titer, is what it's called, how many you have. We can do that for COVID. If we went out there now and some people haven't been exposed to COVID again in the last year or two, we can go out and draw their blood. We look at those B cells, we look at these antibodies, and they're real low. Other people, like me, I get exposed to it because I see patients and stuff. My antibodies are still up here. And that's because I keep replenishing and bringing back up these B cells, and they keep making more of them. So that's how the B cells work in this. They basically are putting flags on the bad guys to tell us that they're there. These antibodies that I'm talking about, these flags, are also called immunoglobulins. So you'll hear people talk about immunoglobulins, and they actually mean antibodies. The next thing is, on this adaptive, is the major histocompatibility complex. These are antigens that basically are signaling on the outside of a cell that it is our cell, that not to kill it is what they are. Now, whenever we have this molecules, most of the time they work fine, unless our immune system gets overzealous, and then we start attacking our own cells. So it becomes a problem there. Autoimmunity is a problem, immunodeficiency. So when we start talking about immunodeficiency, and AIDS is the most common one from the 80s and that, when we start getting immunodeficiency, we have the inability to recognize the bad guys, we have the inability to make antibodies, and our T cells don't know to fight anymore. That's kind of what goes on there. And then allergic reactions. Allergic reactions have to do with the major histocompatibility complex. When we can no longer recognize friend from foe, that's when we're getting allergic reactions to things.
So
yes?
Just a quick clarification on antigens. So that's kind of the identifier, like the costume, like my...
That's a uniform.
My uniform.
Yep.
So is antigen more of an adjective than a noun?
I think you could probably use it as both. You could use it as both. So it could be a noun because you could call out antigen as it's a thing, and then adjective you could say you could say a COVID antigen. So it could be both of them. Yep. Antibodies and antigens. I explained quite a bit just now going through here, but basically they're unique. I think you really have to see them as a puzzle piece. The one thing I would like to point out here is, especially with the histocompatibility, there are certain things in our world that our body can't tell the difference from, and it's causing havoc in our health right now. One of them is gluten. Our body, we have gluten passing. I did this on the digestive tract talk, but gluten, when our body, it passes through the digestive tract because we have leaky gut, we have a virus, we have something that makes it get into our bloodstream, our body makes an antibody against the antigen on gluten. We try to get rid of it, we push out the skin, we do everything we can to get rid of it, but our body can't tell the difference between gluten and thyroid. So we have a ton of people that are having gluten problems nowadays, and now they're turning around and having thyroid problems because you can't tell the difference. So a lot of times I'll run thyroid antibodies and they come back positive. So a person comes in and say, my thyroid, they keep checking, it's fine, but I'm exhausted, I'm tired, I'm gaining weight. We do the full thyroid panel, thyroid antibody. What's the next thing I do? I test to see if they have a gluten sensitivity, because if they do, if we take gluten out of their diet, sometimes their thyroid comes right back to normal without having to have medication or anything. That's when these antibody complexes get confused. It's a big deal there. Again, antibodies are called immunoglobulins. And the reason is they're actually made of proteins and immuno. So they're immune proteins is what they are. They circulate throughout our whole body. They are really, really, really in significant numbers in our lymphatic system and also in our mucosal secretions. So they're not as much in the blood as they are in those areas. Mucosal secretions are important. That's where our gut is. That's where our vaginal tissue. And guys, it's the urethra. We have our lungs. They're really heavy there. That's why a lot of times those are the areas you react at. You have a gut problem when you get sick. You have a breathing problem when you get sick. Urinary tract infections. That's because it's trying to get it before it gets to your blood. Your body has a really hard time killing things once it's in the bloodstream. If we can kill it in these other places, that's why it's set up that way. Antibodies. There is not just one kind of antibody. There's multiple kinds of antibodies. And actually, last time I checked, which has been a little while, it went all the way out to H. So it was IgH is what it was. I don't think they know the function of E and F. I think, or not E and F. F and G. They don't know what they do yet, but they know they exist. The one that I deal a lot with in my practice is IgG. IgG is most of your food sensitivities. IgGs are the ones that are missed by the medical world. The medical world loves to find IgEs. IgEs are usually apparent. You come in, you eat shellfish, and you have a rash, you can't breathe. That's an allergic reaction. That is an IgE. And again, usually allergy or usually parasite based, is your body's trying to protect you from parasites, overreacts to other stuff. IgE is your peanut butter reactions, those kind of things. You know when you have them, and the medical world can see it and say, I see it, I know it's there, let's go test and see what it is. Interesting enough, most of your reactions that you have in your whole body are IgG. These are the ones whenever you have a cold, when you have a flu, these are the ones that are the flags that are going out and sticking to the bacteria, sticking to the viruses, sticking to things like that. It's very interesting. The medical world will acknowledge IgGs when it comes to viruses, bacteria, and things like that. They tend to ignore them when they become to food sensitivities. They don't believe they're real. I was at a long-range shooting camp, sniper camp down in Alabama, and I was the only non-medical doctor there. And it was kind of interesting at first. I think I was shunned. That's how I would say it to begin with. But after a while, there was one guy that was having some breathing problems, so I offered him my remedies in my bag, and it went away. He says, I haven't had a night without breathing problems in years. Another one was having problems, and his was a food sensitivity. He's like, yeah, when I eat food like this, I get bloated, I have these problems and everything. And he was a GI doctor. And I said, you know, I'm pretty sure you're having a dairy issue. This is an IgG to dairy. So your body thinks you're being attacked by dairy and it's made this thing to it. And that's why you're having these problems. He goes, well, how do you know? I said, well, I can see by the bumps in your arms. Also, you're having a harder time, tighter time breathing. And it's not, he goes, well, I've already done food allergy. I said, it's not a food allergy. It's a food sensitivity is what an IgG is. He ended up calling me up, I think it was 3 or 4 months later. He ran the test. And he says, it came back positive. And I said, yeah. I said, are you going to run that on all your patients now when they have these problems? He goes, well, no, because insurance won't pay for it.
Yeah.
But the interesting conversation with him was, he said, and I've had multiple medical doctors say this, I'll say, well, have you tested for food sensitivities? And they'll say, well, that's not a real thing. And they say that because they're taught that by the insurance agencies who don't want to pay for it. It's not a real thing. My answer to him, what convinced him to do the testing was, I said, so if you catch COVID, how do you test for it? He goes, well, we just run a test. I said, what's the test you're running? And he goes, well, we run an antibody test. I said, what antibody? He came around and he finally said, okay, it's an IgG antibody. I said, okay. And I said, what does that tell you? He says, well, it tells us we're reacting to COVID. I said, really? I said, so if you run an IgG test and you ran it against dairy, what does that look like? He goes, well, I mean that I'm reacting to dairy. I said, exactly. And so that's why he ran it. So that's kind of a long spill on that, but the IgG is probably more important than most people realize. IgAs. IgAs are what we have in our nasal passage. We have them in breast milk. We have them in the urethral passage, the vagina, and that. They are kind of a first line of defense. They are semi-specific. Early on in my career, I used to run a lot of IgA food sensitivity. So I'd run an IgA, IgG. I reserve that now. If somebody says every time I eat, my nose is running like crazy, or I have urethral pain when I'm peeing, something like that, I may come back and run that IgA. Typically, I found if they had an IgG, they may have an IgA too, but it was rare that I would ever find one without the other, so it's better to run the IgG. IgM is the very, 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 very first responders. These are in breast milk. These are in your mouth. They are ones that are really non-discrete, but they kind of come out. When we talked about antibodies earlier, I said there was 2. There was the flag, and then there's the paint. They're more of the paint. When they see something they think is bad, they just kind of slime coat it. And that's how, that's the one that your babies are getting with breast milk. And it's also why they can have some type of immunity, innate immunity, because they're getting those IgMs from that, which is significant. IgEs, again, they're to protect us from parasites, but it's what's causing our allergic reactions. D. D is mainly acts as a B cell receptor. So these are on the outside of the B cell, and they are actually an antibody that the dendritic cells and the macrophages recognize. That's how they recognize the B cell, and that's how they kind of plug into each other. That's kind of like a puzzle piece and a puzzle piece. They plug in and communicate that way. That's what they're there for. The antibody-antigen interaction. So they recognize each other. They are very specific to each other. There are some cross reactions between thyroid and gluten. There's some cross reactions between neurological tissue and dairy sensitivities, things like that. But most of the time, when you get an antibody and an antigen plug into each other, you're going to have a whole cascade start triggering. So you have complement. I talked about the dominoes. It starts the dominoes falling, and they start these reactions. I told you I'd get back to this one. The gut. The gut is 70% of our immune system. 70% of our whole immune system lies in the gut. And I think it's even 60% of our lymph nodes in our whole body, 60% of our lymph tissue is around the gut. And so if you think what you eat doesn't matter, your immune system would tell you otherwise. What you eat is 70% of your health, at least. So you can go out and work out all you want to. You can go do all that kind of stuff, but your gut health is the most important thing. The microorganisms, the bacteria in your gut, there's trillions of them. And actually, some say that there's more bacteria in your gut than there are cells in your body. And so it's important. If they're not functioning correctly, your immune system is not functioning correctly.
And stars in the Milky Way.
Yeah. I think there's more cells in there than there are stars in the Milky Way. I think that's what I've heard. So, It's kind of crazy that you have this whole ecosystem in your gut that's bigger than what everything around us, really what you can fathom. Bacteria modulate our immune system more than anything else does. And our bacteria are kind of like a farm. If you're not feeding the cows on the farm, they're going to die. If you're not feeding the pigs on the farm, they're going to die. If you're not feeding the chickens, they're going to die. If we're not eating the right things to feed the right bacteria, they're going to die, and our immune system is going to take a hit there. So that's extremely important. Food sensitivities are mostly an immune dysregulation. And sometimes it's due to the foods we're eating, sometimes it's due to the toxins we're putting in, sometimes it's due to unresolved infections. But it's all due to an aberrant or a wrong immune response is what those food sensitivities are to. I did a whole talk on the gut and also on bacteria in the gut too. So this is where the food sensitivity, the autoimmunity comes back to play. When we don't have a healthy gut, your likelihood of having autoimmune diseases, I would say, is exponentially higher. When your gut is having problems, when you're not putting the right food in, it's going to be there. Not only food sensitivities, but autoimmunity. Most people miss that link. Food sensitivities and autoimmunity. I mentioned now that if I have a problem with gluten, I'm going to have a thyroid problem. Well, the thyroid problem is an autoimmune problem. If I have a problem with dairy, my chances of getting MS are much, much, much higher than what they were otherwise, because you start attacking your own neurological system. And dairy's kind of fat. The myelin sheath around your nerves is what MS is attacking. There's a relationship there. So food sensitivities, if you have some kind of autoimmune disease, you should get food sensitivities checked. It's just there. It could change everything in your world. Common immune dysfunctions, autoimmunity. Basically, this is where the antibodies are confused. Somewhere along the way, your B cells have gotten the wrong message from your dendritic cells or your macrophages, or they've made an antibody to dairy or gluten, and they can't tell a difference from your own. This is a mimicry thing where your body is being mimicked by other things and you start attacking yourself. Allergies and sensitivities, basically this is where your body starts attacking things that it shouldn't because it thinks they're dangerous. So that's what an allergy is. An allergy is not a danger, it's what it thinks it is. Chronic infections. So a lot of your chronic infections, after you go out past that 8 weeks, your body has sent out so many chemicals saying that you're under attack, that it actually wears down those chemicals. It runs out of the stores, it runs out of the soldiers, it runs out of everything. And now that infection has gotten to the point that your body says, you know what, I can't fight anymore. Let's just live with them. It's kind of like either, can't beat them, join them. That's kind of what it does. Immunodeficiency. This is where we get weak and we can't go anymore. If you look at this and you broke it down in half, this basically says you either have immune regulation one way or the other. You either have it regulated right in the middle of this and there's no problem, or it's too high and you're fighting yourself or you're making allergies, or it's too low and you can't fight off the bad guys. So in the immune system in general, it's important to have modulation. So each one of these chronic diseases are an immune problem. If we're looking at heart disease, it's 100% an immune problem. There's no doubt about it. Heart disease isn't your heart's going bad or whatever. It's you're attacking your heart for some reason. Either it's full of toxin, you have fats that aren't working right, you've scarred it up. Heart disease, for 90% of them, are you attacking your heart. That's what it is. It could be cholesterol. You put cholesterol in to heal it, and you start attacking it with the macrophages. Your kidney disease, most of it's you've put a toxin in, your body's actually attacking that toxin. Diabetes, most of diabetes is insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is an inflammation of the receptor sites where insulin fastens to the cell. So it's an inflammatory process too. Neurodegenerative disorders. Almost all these are a toxic buildup. You get things built up, you begin to attack them, or you get something like a dairy sensitivity and we're not treating it, and you end up with MS, other type of neurological disorder. So all of these, when you get back to it, you can be born with an anomaly. That's not called a disease. So you can be born with a heart that doesn't function right. You can have things like that. That's not a disease. A disease is when something has led to it, and it's always going to be an immune dysfunction that leads to these diseases. So that's important to know. So common causes for these dysfunctions. Chronic stress, number one. So when you wake up in the morning time, your cortisol levels are at their highest of the day. Well, when cortisol levels are high, your immune system's at its very lowest. They actually go cyclical. Now, you get tired at nighttime and you're getting ready for bed, your cortisol levels drop. That's what's supposed to happen. It says, you're tired, go to sleep, and you go to sleep. As it drops, your immune system goes up. The immune system says, okay, now I'll take the time to heal you while you're sleeping. So that's called parasympathetic 2. It's called rest, digest, and heal. In the morning, you're in fight or flight, get up, get going. You can have the day, you can do everything. They crisscross. When you're under chronic stress, your cortisol levels stay high. They stay high. You don't want to sleep at night, or you want to sleep, but you lay there in bed, you can't sleep, that kind of stuff. You're worried about things. Well, anytime my cortisol's up here, my immune system's down here. And when your immune system's low, your immune system's always still going to try to fight the bad guy, but it doesn't do it right anymore. It doesn't make antibody complexes that are doing it right. The complement doesn't do right. The interleukin is sending signals all over the place that nobody can understand. Everybody's trying to use the same radio channel and they don't know what's going on. So you end up having all kinds of immune suppression. You start having an immune system that doesn't work right under chronic stress. Nutrient deficiencies. So this is one that can go both ways, and I have nutrient deficiencies. If you look right underneath of it, it's nutrient excesses. So remember, we are trying to balance the immune system. We don't want to rev it through the roof. We want to balance it. So if you don't have enough vitamin D, you're going to have a weakened immune system. You don't have enough cholesterol, you're going to have a weakened immune system. You don't have enough vitamin C, you're going to weaken it. Not enough zinc. This is the one that most people are missing on. Antioxidants. We only get antioxidants from plant matter when we eat plants, vegetables. And I will tell you, this region is the worst I've ever seen about eating vegetables. I've had this week, I've had couples in, and I asked them what vegetables to eat, and they're like, yeah, I don't eat vegetables. I don't know, I just don't eat them. And if you want to see if you're eating enough vegetables, if your fingernails aren't painted, look at your fingernails, and if you have moons, and the moons are the white little circles there, if you have decent moons, you're probably getting enough vegetables in. If you don't have moons, it means one of two things. You're not getting enough vegetables, or for some reason you have a gut problem, you're not digesting them. That's two possibilities there. Now, nutrient excess. I saw this in COVID, extreme issues with this. Especially zinc. I had a classic zinc one. One day, I saw a lot of people from Monsanto at my other practice. And they came in, and Monsanto decided that everybody needed more zinc. So they would go at the entrance to every major room, they put a big bowl of zinc lozenges, is what they did. And so COVID, things are starting to open back up, and I get a flood of neuropathy patients coming in. They couldn't feel their hands anymore, they couldn't feel their feet, and they were sick people. They were all coming from Monsanto. And so I started asking questions like, what's going on there? Something's happening at work, and I thought maybe it was they all got COVID vaccine exposure or something there. That's where they were making it at. And at Pfizer there too. They had a policy that anytime you enter the room, you were supposed to take a zinc lozenge. People were overdosing on zinc. Zinc is supposed to be, normal day is supposed to be between 30 and 50 micrograms. People were taking like 1,000 in a day. And it's a metal, so it's interfering with their neurological system, but it was shutting down the immune system too. So these people were sick as could be, and they couldn't. We took them off of it within 2 weeks. All of a sudden, they could feel their hands and feet, and there was no problem anymore. But it was a big one. Iron. So a lot of guys will have, especially if hemochromatosis, don't have period and stuff, your iron will actually get too high. Guys should go get blood. If you have decent iron levels and decent blood levels, go get blood. It actually helps your immune system. Iron tends to get in the way of the antibody-antigen complex. So the flag can't stick into the puzzle. And so even women, as you get older, you get past menstruation, giving blood makes a difference. Vitamin A. So vitamin A, and I could put vitamin C in here too. There are a lot of times that those two are put in every supplement. So you'll have people taking 3 or 4 supplements, but if you look at some of the common things are vitamin A, vitamin C, and all of a sudden they get too much of it. And it causes oxidative stress. Antioxidants means you have less, this means you have more. So it's a big player in there. So looking at your stuff, if your vitamin says, hey, this is 100% or whatever, and you're taking 600, 800% of certain things, probably need to take a look at it. B vitamins are a little different. You can get B vitamins well up because they're soluble and you pee them out. But those things you don't want to. This is probably our big one. Pesticides, heavy metals, mold toxicity, plastics, and food preservatives. I've talked in my other ones about food preservatives. The U.S. government has made rules that basically food and supplements and things like that, they can put anything they want to in it as long as 1 dose is not toxic. So you go out and you get 8 potato chips and you're under the toxic level of preservatives. Nobody eats 8 potato chips. Or maybe you do only eat 8 potato chips, but then you get the hot dog and the hot dog bun, and now you're over your toxic load. So we are being poisoned every day with the food and that and the pesticides and the heavy metals. It's kind of crazy. Mold is another one. Mold actually used to be 100 years ago, used to have kinds of molds in certain areas. It was very localized where you had molds, because by the time a person would travel from Missouri out here to the frontier, it died, it left. Now we got people on planes moving out here. We got people loading up whole tractor trailer loads of everything they had in their last moldy house moving out. So now we're starting to get more mold problems in different places. In Missouri, where I practiced at, we were right between 3 rivers. We were in a triangle, the Merrimack River, the Missouri, and the Mississippi. The moldiest place in the country, actually. We had molds there that grew from Louisiana, ones that grew in Michigan, and they all grew there because that made it warm enough in the wintertime, they would keep growing, and it was a breeding ground. And so mold is an interesting one that people miss out on. Poor gut health, leaky gut, dysbiosis. I get people in here, and a guy this week, I asked him about his bowel habits, and he said, oh, no problems. And so then his wife's like, you've had diarrhea for 10 years. Isn't that normal? No, that's not normal that you have to go to the bathroom 8-10 times a day for 10 years. Many people just get used to their guts not feeling good because it's been that way so long that they don't know any different. And sometimes it's an easy fix. We give a digestive enzyme. Other times we have to spend a little money, get it tested out. But if you spend some money and figure it out, it's a game changer. Adds 20 or 30 years to your life. If it's messed up, your whole immune system's messed up. So it's worth checking into. Sleep deprivation. So the main thing this does, and I probably could have wrote a little different. Again, if you're not sleeping, your cortisol levels aren't dropping and your immune system isn't going up. You have to sleep to get that fixed. I'll also say this too. Your brain, when you sleep, there's an area, a time about 4 hours in when your brain actually shrinks. Shrinks down actually significantly. And at that point, the fluid comes out of your brain. It's exchanged for clean fluid. That's the time that it cleans up everything in your brain, keeps it from getting sick, keeps the immune system down. If you have people that are not sleeping, you'll usually start noticing their memory goes pretty quick. They start aging pretty quick. So sleep is extremely important. Sedentary lifestyle. The main reason this is important, your lymphatic system, anybody that was here for that talk, knows that your lymphatic system has no pump on it. It does not pump. The only way for you to get your lymphatic system, your lymph nodes and everything cleaned out is to move them. You have to move them. So you can see individuals that start sweating all the time, they start swelling, they start having immune situations, immune problems, inflammation. You need to move. You have to move. And then overactivation. This is chronic inflammation, allergy type things. You will have people, especially old military guys, come in and they have fungus growing on every toenail, as yellow as thick as can be. Their feet have fungus on it. Sometimes you can start seeing them rusting coming up their legs and everything. They're like, it's no big deal. It's been there all my life. Well, those chronic infections don't just inflame that area. They're sending out cytokines, interleukins to your whole body. Or you'll get somebody that has a cut on their hand. Say, hey, you ought to probably treat that. Oh, it'll be okay. I have them all the time. Those little chronic infections, when you don't treat them, add up to be big ones. Again, it's pain begets pain. You have one here, you have one here. Well, inflammation begets inflammation the same way. So, signs that you have an immune system dysfunction: frequent infections, chronic fatigue, digestive issues, inflammatory symptoms, so joint pain, swelling, skin irritation. I have people that come in that, they come in for something else, and I'll say, hey, how long have you had this rash on you? I don't know, since I was little. And like, wait, that's not normal. You shouldn't have that. Slow wound healing. This is another one. There's multiple reasons for it, but usually there's some kind of immune response going on. Allergies, sensitivities, autoimmune, they kind of all fall in the same thing. You're too revved up at that point. And then mood changes. This is a sad but true thing that happens to people, especially women. Women get to be older. They're 80-some years old, and they're still working around the house. They're doing everything. They're like, yeah, mom, grandma's doing great. She's still taking care of herself. And all of a sudden, something changes. Well, yeah, grandma just got crazy. She was just doing crazy things. And we actually had a lady that used to rent a house from us that cut the tails off her puppy dogs one night just with a butcher knife and ruined the house. But anyway, she ended up in a nursing home. They don't think anything about it. She's in a nursing home. She's crazy. And all of a sudden one day, somebody tested her urine sample. She had a bacterial infection in her urine sample. If you ever have an old person, male, female, or even a little kid, that all of a sudden just out of the blue is not normal, they're crazy, they're loopy, get them tested for a urinary tract infection. It will change mood. But other chronic infections do the same thing. Epstein-Barr, which is monovirus, it will cause mood changes, anxiety, depression, things like that. And some people will get it, they think they're over it, and it's just smoldering there. So any of your smoldering infections can cause those situations. Okay, this is kind of a transition from that. I have been writing a book and working pretty hard on it. It's ready to go to editor. We just talked to them today. But I've come up with a new protocol or new process. It's called Restore MILA. MILA stands for mitochondrial immune lymphatic access. And the principle is these three things have to work integral, just one with the other. Your lymphatic system drains the fluid out of the cells, all the debris away from the cells. The lymphatic system also pulls away from the outside of the cells, so it's kind of your sewer system. Your mitochondria is your powerhouse. It basically comes in and makes all the energy. But what most people don't realize is the mitochondria has two other functions. Its function is to signal when the cell can't do anything more. When the cell has been overwhelmed, it has too much toxin in it, there's an inflammatory process, it sends out a signal. And it actually sends out cytokines and interleukins telling the world that there's a problem. The immune system is basically that halfway place between the lymphatic system and the mitochondria. Most doctors out there right now, functional medicine doctors, are touting, make your cell have more energy, give you more energy, do this. The mitochondria can only make so much energy if there's toxins and if the lymphatic system is backed up. It can't get rid of the waste. And so you have a lot of doctors out there right now that are giving supplements, and people will feel really good for about 2, 3, 4 months, and then they're going to crash because they become a sewer pit. Methylene blue is one of those ones. You'll see it advertised all over the internet right now, and people, methylene blue. It's a methylene liquid. People will go and take it because it makes them feel really, really good for a day to 3 months. You're most likely going to crash that MILA system, is what you're going to do. So on the MILA symptom, or MILA, the main description of this is your mitochondria. Your mitochondria, again, are your powerhouse. They clean out toxins, though. When mitochondria is functioning correctly, and there's a whole talk on this I did, I'm going to make this short. When they're functioning correctly, they make, for every unit that comes into them, they make 26 ATP. That's 26 BTU if you're talking about power, or 26 gallons of gas, if you want to say it that way. When you start putting in too much toxins, you put in especially too much sugar. We're not meant to run on the sugar that we're running on. It cuts down to only making 2. So it goes from 26 to 2. What it does instead now is that extra 24, it's making a signal telling your cell, don't bring any more in, let's stop. So now you've just cut down your energy supply. You've just made inflammation go up. And so mitochondria are extremely important in this. The lymphatic system. When you start revving up the mitochondria, you have to clean it out. The lymphatic system pulls all the debris away. It also houses all those white blood cells we just talked about. They live there. They mature there. They figure out, they're talking to each other. So when we talked about the macrophage and we talked about the dendritic cells, when they're doing the talk and saying, hey, here's the bad guy, here's the good guy, they're doing it inside the lymphatic system. If the lymphatic system has too much interleukin, too much cytokine going on in it, if it has too many bad signals in on it, it gets mixed up. It starts causing you autoimmune diseases. It starts causing you problems. So now you can see you start putting toxins in, bad guys in on the mitochondria, and then they can't get out of the way. You're bound to have allergies. You're bound to have autoimmunity. You're bound to have all kinds of chronic disease from it. So it's significant. The integration of myelin, that's what I just went over, is how they all play together. And this is, when we come to restore myelin, this is the protocol I've been working on now for, if you want to say, I'd say 12 years at least, but it finally really came together. I was giving the talk. I gave the talk on lymphatics. I gave the talk on mitochondria, and now was doing the immune system. And I finally thought I need to put it together so people can see what I'm talking about. Restore myelin. Basically, the idea is to get that whole axis working again. First of all, you have to reveal what's going on. I have just paid an IT guy to come in, and we are making what's called a dynamic intake. Basically, it asks you a specific question. Depending on how you answer it, it goes down that tree of questions, and it's kind of like a big, broad tree. If you answer it differently, it goes down this way here. So I can, in the very end, before I ever sit down with you, I'll be able to ask you very specific questions and have an idea before you walk in the office. And then we've come up with the fundamental 4 testing. And so basically we want to see, how's your gut doing? How's your immune system doing? Do you have any genetics that are your base that are in the way? And we figure it out through that 4. The first phase, even if nobody did the second phase, if nobody did the dynamic intake, did the 4, the first phase would still benefit everybody. The first phase is, hey, let's back out some of the toxins. Let's clean up the diet for a while. Let's start cleaning out the toxins. Let's get the lymphatics working first. There's a critical component missing in most medicine. Our job in most time is to say, hey, let's give you more energy. You're tired, let's give you more energy. Hey, let's go give you more hormones. You're tired, let's pump in the hormones. You know what hormones do to mitochondria? They speed it up. They start throwing more junk on it. Well, if the mitochondria has already said, I give, you throw more on it, you might feel really good for hormones for maybe the first round, maybe the second round, and then you're going to need more. Then you're going to need more. After a while, they shut down. They don't work anymore. So cleaning out the junk always has to be the first goal, because you can't put anything more in the mitochondria. You can't calm down the immune system if you haven't cleaned out the sewer. So that's the first goal, is to clean out the sewer. Once you've cleaned out the sewer, you have to balance the immune system. There's things out there like turmeric. There's IgG formulas. There's enzymatic formulas. Omega-3s start to calm that down. If you try to calm down the immune system before you clean out the sewer, it actually backfires on you. Your body thinks, hey, I have a major problem here, and you're trying to ignore it. So it actually heightens the inflammation. And we see this all the time. The medical world, a lot of times, if you're coming swollen, they give you a diuretic. And interesting thing about a diuretic is, a diuretic doesn't clean out the lymphatic system like you think it would. It actually thickens it. It pulls the moisture out of it. So now, instead of your white blood cells being this far apart, they're all squished in there together, and there's a lot of chemicals in one little place. So you actually want to thin the lymph and get it drained so it goes down, and not just take out. Diuretics are great for congestive heart failure. Probably don't have much of a need anywhere else, truthfully. There's other things that would work better. So has to be in order. Basically, figure out what's going on, clean it out, balance the immune system. Then, at this stage, you can come in and you can turbocharge those cells. You can start to speed them up. They can start to go back and making energy, doing the things they did, because you cleaned out the toxins. You made it so the sewer can clean out the debris. It's important. Then, after you've done that, then we go to neurological repair. Many individuals right now are taking psych meds. They're taking things to basically try to help them think right. If your brain is not cleaning out the junk, you're only going to have junk. It's junk in, junk out. your brain is that same way. The lymphatic system inside the brain is the lymphatic system in there. You can't go target it and give chemicals and things to it to clean it out if the lymphatic system isn't working. There's an exchange. It's kind of an exchange from the lymphatic system to lymphatic. If it's clogged up and the sewer's clogged up, you can put whatever you want to in the sink. It's not going to go down. So the brain is actually comes after you've done the lymphatic system, after you've balanced the immune system, after you've turbocharged it. Now you can clean out the brain. We start working on sleep patterns. We start getting the lymphatics to work, and it makes a big difference. If you want to heal tissue, so you've hurt your knee and it's been 10 years, it's not healing. The doctor says, I can't do anything about it. You have a problem going on with the shoulder or something like that. If you set up all the things ahead of time and you get to this point, now you've made your immune system begin to work right. Your immune system is working the way it should. You can come back in and now we can do some things to stimulate that tissue. Maybe we come in and we do dry needling on it. We move it around, we manipulate it, and all of a sudden that tissue that never healed in the past is able to actually get the right signal. Instead of being chronic inflammation, it says, hey, let's do an acute inflammation. Let's come in and clean this out and heal it. So now we can start healing tissues. Once we've done that, we've pretty well done everything we need to do. Now we just need to maintain it. So that's the restore process that I've been writing on. So now, lifestyle and immune health foundational pillars. Balanced nutrition, keeping junk out of your body, eating. I've said this in the nutritional class I've done. You will get vegetarians that say it is the best meal plan in the world. And it is for about a year to 2 years. And most studies on vegetarians are only done for about that long because most of them get sick after that. Carnivore diet, best meal plan for about a year or 2 years, and then you start to fall apart. You need antioxidants from vegetables, otherwise you fall apart. You need proteins from meats, or you fall apart eventually. Both of them look real good because most people were eating junk. And if you're eating junk and you go to eating whole one ingredient foods like vegetables and stuff, you're going to heal. You're going to be better. If you're eating junk and you go to a carnivore diet, you're going to be good until you run out of the other stuff. So balanced nutrition is important. Paleo diet is still the best, Mediterranean type paleo diet. And that's what I usually give people. Hydration. If we're talking about the immune system, you have to hydrate the immune system. Most of your immune system is lymphatics based. If the lymphatics get thickened up, clogged up, all those cells get close together, you're not doing well. Hydration doesn't mean monster drinks. It doesn't mean coffee. It means water. You need water. You can add electrolytes to it, but you need water. Support your lymphatic flow. There's multiple ways. That's hydration, that's activity, that's moving. If you're not moving, you're getting stagnant. It's a real thing. Reduce and eliminate the toxins. You know, I'm still working on this myself. I went out and painted some things in the building the other day, and the first 2 times I went out, I put on my mask. The last time it actually blew out across the sidewalk, and I didn't go get it until I was done. So I'm getting better, but all of us could eliminate toxins somewhere. Cleaning our vegetables, cleaning our fruit, filtering our water, just watching what you're doing with everyday house. You know, if you have Febreze spraying off every day in your house, you have candles going and stuff, think about it. It's not right. Sleep. A lot of people have a problem with sleep. Part of it's because their immune system is overreactive and they're having problems there. Some of it is that they are sitting there watching video games and playing on their phone, and they wonder why they're sitting there just watching all the political stuff and everything else in the world, and they just watch all the kids dying around the world and everything else. They wonder why they can't go to sleep. Put it away and read a book. Regular movement. If you're not getting up and moving at least once an hour for 5 or 10 minutes, you're not moving. You know, you need to move around. And I know it's hard. People have jobs and things, but usually a 5-minute motion there is going to make a difference. And then stress reduction. I would put moving and stress reduction one and the same. They have done studies, and one of the best ways to reduce stress, and I mentioned this in one of the other classes, is to take a short walk and look at the little things. Go out and look and say, well, look at that feather on the ground. Look at that grass growing up in the sidewalk. Look at the color of that. Your brain is still primitive. When you go out calmly and you look at things like that, it thinks that you're foraging and that you're not scared of something. When you sit inside and you sit in a desk and you're in a building, it thinks that the tiger's outside or the other tribe's outside and that you're hiding in the cave and your cortisol levels automatically go up. So going out, taking a little walk, looking around is a big deal. And then emotional balance. Again, I see the internet's probably the worst thing from that. You go on Cody classifieds and stuff, and you see everybody has an emotional comment to something. And so I think the internet's probably the worst thing for that. So takeaways, immune balance equals health. It's not about torquing your immune system up here or cutting it down here. It's about balancing that immune system is probably most important. The mitochondrial, lymph, and immune axis have to work together. If you're working on straight immune system and you're ignoring the lymph and you're ignoring the mitochondria, or vice versa, you have a problem. And I think what I'm working on and laying out is going to be pretty revolutionary. I think I've put it together, and I've taken Chinese medicine, I've taken all the eastern side, the western side, all my 4 degrees and my years of knowledge, and put it together in that. Restoration is more important than stimulation. Everybody's trying to stimulate their adrenals. Everybody's trying to jack their hormones through the roof right now. I have more people right now coming in because they say, well, I hear I need hormones. Well, no, let's clean out the myla and all of a sudden find out that your hormones work just fine. You're not having a problem. So restoration is more important than stimulation. One of those things I just mentioned, if anybody, because people ask, so what would I do first? There are 4 products that you do for 8 to 12 weeks, and they start that process for anybody. And there is no side effects from that for anybody on those 4. I worked out hard to make it that way, and that's where I would start if anybody was interested in knowing what to do about that. Next month, by the way, if you like what you heard tonight, give me a good review. It helps my world. I do these for free. I print out books for free, and it does make a difference in my world. Next month, I'm going to talk about myla. I'm going to go into the chronic diseases. So I'm going to go into heart disease, the ones we saw up there a while ago, heart disease, neurodegenerative disease, autism, and diabetes. And I'm going to say, this is the core, this is where they're coming from, this is what needs to be done about them. And so that's the next month.